Loves here, and today we're going to be doing a rundown on Polyplex by Twisted Tools. I'm going to endeavor to answer every question you have about this thing in this one video. If you have any other questions about this thing, you can refer to the S-Layer series, which is a very, very similar ensemble, also made by Twisted Tools, or you can just drop it in the comments and I'll do my best. So, okay, this is Polyplex. Polyplex has the ability to create these sounds. I'm going to refer to them as scenes because that's what I'm used to calling them, but they're technically, I would refer to them as sounds because they're labeled sound 1, sound 2, sound 3, but I'm going to call them scenes. And what it is you can take in each scene, it can have its own parameters with its own samples. In this case, you can have 4 samples in each scene with its own parameters. And you can use randomization to generate interesting scenes. So you take your sounds, you randomize various things about them, the sound you use, the pitch of the sound, the start point of the sound, and you layer it together with a couple other sounds, and that forms a scene. And then you can put them together into 8 scenes to form a little kit. So it's not just drums. You could use this to chop up voices and such. And they have a lot of really cool examples in here that we may take a look at. I'm going to try and sort of power my way through this just so that this is an easy thing to understand. So, okay, cool. So let's go over the main arching concept of this and then delve into it deeper and deeper. So we have these 8 scenes. And if I were to play them, I can play them using my MIDI keyboard. And you can configure your MIDI keyboard by clicking this little keyboard icon. And you can this quick fill icon determines the note they start at. So mine start at C3, and I can make them be only the white keys, which I find a sort of funny term, but okay. And we have chromatic, so we can have every key. So it's like chromatic and then white keys instead of every key and white keys. I don't know. So anyways, it makes sense. I'm giving them a hard time. And we also have MIDI learn, which allows you to use MIDI to learn it. I don't know. I don't really ever mess with that. And I know that isolate has something to do with saving snapshots. There are a couple of those buttons that when I need them, I know that they exist somewhere, but I don't know exactly what they do. So, okay, cool. So that's how you would configure this. So now we can play it. Now let's say that, okay, cool. Now what I want to do is take this drum kit and make a variation on the kit so that I can play like one set of sounds and then quickly switch over to another set. But I want to do it in a very intuitive manner. So we see here that we have this MIDI keyboard up here. And this MIDI keyboard is controlled by, in my case, so far, it's always been the octave below whatever these were set at. So if I were to go down an octave, I'm able to, as you see, scroll through these keys up here, or you can just click on them. But I can click on the key. So in this case, I hit a C. And now if I hit the C an octave up, it will trigger the Polyplex sounds. Now, what's cool about this is if I hit the next key, this sound is now that same kit, but it's like a variation on the kit. So I can mess with this sound and change it, and then I can go back to here and I'll have the original sound, so I can switch through these sets of sounds really quickly in a very easy manner. And each sound has this dice under it, and each dice has a dot next to it, except for this dice, which is a special dice. So the scene dice will randomize all the parameters in a scene, so that has a dot next to it. So it gets a little crazy. If there's a dot, that means there's a level above it. That's all you really need to know about the dots. So let's say for scene 1, you notice that all the text is blue because I have scene 1 selected. To select a new scene, click on it, and you can click up on top if you don't want to hear it. If you want to audition it, you can actually click the little thing, and you'll get a preview of the waveform. You'll see it's all layered. So all the sounds that are playing will be layered on top of each other right here. So cool beans. Now, okay, so we have the ability to audition our sounds, and what I can do is I can come in here, and each one of these scenes has the sounds, the layers in them, which are represented by these rows, and each row is is broken up into pieces that are associated with various parameters. So this one controls the samples that are being played. This one controls the pitch, the start, offset. And underneath those, they have their own dice, which randomizes. If I click on it, it will randomize only that set. And if there's a dot next to it, what the dot means is it's giving permission to the layer above it, meaning this is a parameter level layer. It's giving its permission to be randomized by this level. So what I can do is I can enable several layers, several parameters, and I can move the scene dice, and it will move them all for me in one big go. Now, okay, that's what that does. If I go up another layer to the master dice, there's no dot next to it because it's at the top. These dots give permission to the master dice to alter the entire ensemble. So basically, this dice is going to randomize this scene, which is randomizing these parameters. So they must have dots next to them. So if I click this, I'm moving this. But if I click this, it just moved everything with a dot next to it in all 8 scenes. And so scene 2 is changed. So if I were to click this, you see scene 2 changes, and so on and so forth. Now, this dice is a pretty cool dude. If you click near the dice, it will be small amounts of randomization. You see, they're not moving too much. But if I hit further away, very large, rapid changes, then that's going to change your sound quite a bit. Now, this panning, look at this. This panning isn't something I probably want to automate. Everything's going to be over to one side. I don't want that. So to reset a parameter, you can control right-click on the name, and it will move it all back to its default value. Then I'm going to make it so that the dot, I don't want a dot next to that one. So now if I click this, I can get those big changes without it. Let's say that I still want to randomize the panning, but not as much. Well, I can click on it, and I can drag these guys down. And what I've done is I'm changing the minimum and maximum value for the slider. So if they have these things underneath it, they are linking it to the slider. So right now, I've set it so that the max left it can go is 13 and the max right is 15. So now, even though it'll look like big changes, it's really not all that big. They're much smaller changes. So I'm able to control my randomization by clicking closer to the dice, further away, and if a parameter has these sliders, by changing the minimum and maximum values. You can't do that for samples, which baffles me a little bit. In S layer, you totally can, but not in this ensemble. So that's no big deal, whatever. They have a subtype parameter to sort of deal with what I'm getting at here, which we'll look at in a little bit. So that's how this randomization thing works. And so let's go ahead and go back to our original. So what I'm going to do is I want to hit this master random button, and I've just changed all of these quite substantially. And so I'm going to go and play these. That's my new sounds. But if I hit my next key right here, so I've moved up, well, I've kept it completely untouched. And I can go up, and you see it's cloned it again. So I could change this one a bunch of times, hit it, maybe some more drastic changes. And then if I go through here, and you see, whoa, and I'll go to my next set, and it's completely untouched. I go to my first set, and there we go. So I'm able to generate like entire drum kits very quickly using this method, or ambient sound kicks, or whatever you want to call it. So it's a very handy-dandy way of doing things, if you ask me. And most of the parameters are pretty self-explanatory. So now you've got a general idea of some workflow ideas with Polyplex. So let's get into a couple more finer details. We've already talked about this, but this again just lets you change the way it behaves when you're playing it. When you're moving around like this, you're going to want to eventually get into the sample level and make some specific changes. Maybe there's a particular sample that's not doing something that you want. Well, you may want to be switching between scenes quite fast too, and it becomes a hassle to come up here and click all the time. So they provided you with this little box icon right here. I shall call it the MIDI select box, because I don't know the name for it. And as I hit it, as I hit my MIDI keys, it will immediately go to that it will select it. As you see, everything's orange, indicating I'm on sound 5 or scene 5. In my lingo, I like to call them scenes. Now let's go over here. So that's what that does. We have velocity, makes the instrument velocity sensitive. So right now, if I hit it really soft with a velocity sensitivity of 0, it doesn't care. Whoops. It doesn't care how hard or soft I hit the key. Now it cares a little bit more. Now it cares a lot. So if I hit it soft, it's going to play it soft. Loud, it's going to play it much louder. We have the ability to tune the ensemble. We have a decay envelope. And if I turn this down and play some of the sounds, you see I've reduced them all to little clicks because they've got a very fast decay on them. If I move them up, they'll ring out for their proper amounts. We're able to change the volume, and we're also able to put a limiter on. So I leave the limiter on. Okay, cool. So that's what's going on there. Let's go ahead and hop into the scene level. Now at the scene level, we have the ability to solo a scene. So right now I've soloed scene 1. So despite me hitting other scenes, 1 is the only one that's been given permission to go. And I can solo multiple scenes at a time, which is something that you can't do in S layer. Now let's go over here to the mute. I'm able to mute it. So you see if I hit it, I'm hitting scene 1. I have it selected. Let's select this one. See, I'm hitting it, no dice. So I've muted it. And then we've already talked about these dice and dots. So that's cool. Now let's dive into let's go to another main concept here. So now that we've got that, let's really quick just cover all the parameters. So we have samples. Samples selects the samples from your sample map. The sample map is determined by your type. So over here we have our type, and we're able to choose our sample maps. You have a user sample map. You can save a sample map and edit a sample map by going in here. So this is the waveform sample map editor. You click on it, and you're able to, if you want to make your own sample map, just select all the samples, get rid of them, and save your own sample map. You need to be in edit mode for the sample map thing to be here, and you click, once you drag yours in, you click, oh man, I can't talk right now. You click export with references only unless you want to clone the audio data, and then you can drop it in and load it up and do all these cool things. I'm going to leave that for the video in the S layer series on using your own samples in S layer. It's the exact same process, so you can go just check out that video. So, okay, that's what's going on there, and that's how you get your own samples in here. Now, we can also scroll through their sample maps. Now, you might be going, okay, that's what this type does. So I can have like one scene just for kicks, another scene just for claps. Very, very intuitive way of doing things. But now you might be going, what's this subtype for? Well, this selects a range of samples. And if we go to the user, it's very obvious. So here, if I go to user, we're actually given the range. So we say, oh, I want to only select samples from 96 to 127. And that's essentially having a slider tab on the samples thing here. But this is cool as a subtype because you're able to like say, hey, I want the kicks and the digital sounding kicks. And if you map it correctly, you can get something very similar. You'd have to do it in numbers. So be like, oh, samples 96 to 127 sound like digital kicks, and so on and so forth, or however you have yours set up. So that's what those do. The samples selects the samples from the sample map. We have the ability to pitch a sample up or down. Let's start over here. We have the ability to mute a layer. So each one of these is a layer, and each layer has its own parameters. And right now I can mute layers 2, 3, 4. So that now only the top layer is playing. And did I mute something somewhere? Oh, I'm in the user map. See, right, and the user map has no samples. So obviously I'm not going to hear anything. So I go to the kick and see we've got only the top layer playing. I'm able to pitch it up and down. I'm able to change the offset. What the offset does is as I move it, it'll start playing the sample later and later in the sample. So if sample starts here, the offset will move it over a little bit and play it over there. They call it start. I call it offset because it's a little more clear. But it offset start, I don't know what a good one-word name for this would be. I guess start's as good as any other. You're able to pan it. Ooh, panning. And you're able to change the volume of the individual layer. That's pretty cool. If we move over to the envelope page, so we have our parameter pages up here, and I'm just going to dive through all these right now. So actually, I didn't finish this one. If we come over here, I'm able to reverse the sample, and that's what this arrow does. So forwards, backwards. I'm able to take it from stereo to mono, which in this case, not a huge difference, but stereo to mono. We have the ability to do a flip, so phase invert or polarity flip. That one actually makes a little bit of a difference by itself. This could be a really big difference maker, though, when you have multiple samples together, because they might have the way they sum together may not be so friendly, and this could change a lot of the sound. Just sometimes. Most of the time, it doesn't do too much. And then we have the ability to lock a layer. What a locked layer means is when I move things, I can move other parameter settings, but this one is locked solid. I can't touch it at all. And then I'm also able to link layers. So if I make an adjustment to one parameter on one samples layer, it will change them all, as you can see. Very visual. That's what these parameters do. That is what they are there for. If we go over to the envelopes, we're able to scroll through. We see our sample stays the same. And something about these bars too is if I double click the bar, a little pink thing will pop up. And that basically means I can still move it. It's not like the lock layer. But when I randomize it, it is safe from randomization. So that's a very powerful tool. Another thing I didn't say was if you've made a move that you don't like, you can undo it, which is a new feature that they didn't have in S layer. So that's an incredibly good feature. Maybe you went down a side or some road that you didn't like, you can undo it. I don't know how many undos, I've never tested it, but you have an undo feature. We have our envelopes. Envelopes are pretty self-explanatory. Attack, decay, release. Attack, hold, decay. And you're able to change through the envelopes by clicking on this icon. You also have a delay, which just will delay it. So if you put a delay, you see 370 millisecond delay. So if I hit the key, it takes a while for it to play. And that's what goes on there. Okay, cool. And next up, we have an EQ. So we have low shelf, high shelf, gain, all that stuff. Some values are fixed, some aren't. So like the gain, you can change the actual gain of the highs. But over here, low shelf, you just select a frequency. So meant for being musical, not meant for being surgical. If you want to edit at the sample layer, you'd have to either work in S layer, so you can do that and you do the multi-out option, or you take out your sample, edit your samples so that they're the way you actually want them, and then put it into Polyplex and problem solved. So that's what's going on there. Or you could mute the samples, record them. I don't know. There's a variety of samples. But basically, I'm saying there's no easy way to do this. It's meant for gradual shaping, not for being surgical. So, okay, that's what these parameters do. That's what all of the parameters do. And you see I also have corresponding randomization and dots and everything. These dots over here are relevant to the columns. So if we were to randomize the layer, you see it's randomizing these columns. And so that's what that does. Cool. We understand this. We have copy and paste. These are common features. So we have a default. You click that, it will default everything or initialize it, preset, or whatever it is. You have the ability to copy something and to paste it somewhere else. And if you click this little cog, these extra menus show up. Randomization for users is a separate option. At least now this one, I don't know totally what this does, but it's got the dice next to it. So I'm pretty sure that's what it does. So if you don't want to randomize your user map, apparently this is the setting. I don't know. They must have a reason for it being a setting thing. In fact, we can even check. If you don't know what a parameter does, you have a little info hint and you can hover it over it and it will tell you. See, excludes user samples from type randomization. So you cannot So, okay, that's a useful feature. If you don't want your type to be randomized here from the users, I guess you have that as an option. We have choke. Now, choke groups, the way they work is you have 4 of them, and this is common in tons of different synths and sample playback engines and stuff. So what it does is if samples are in a choke group, so let's say I believe 3 and 4 are in choke group 1. Yeah. So that basically means they cannot play at the same time. So if 4 is playing and 3 starts up, 4 shuts up. Unless there's a delay or something. If there's a delay or something, the delay will ring out, but the sample itself has been stopped. So if I play these at the same time or try to, you see it has to pick. If I get really, really close together, it appears like they're playing at the same time, but they're not. It's detecting that I hit one before the other slightly, so it just puts it in right after. So that's what's going on there. And so that's the choke group, and you have 4 of those. You have output. That's useful for like hi-hats a lot of the times, a common use. So if you have an open hi-hat, you want it to shut up with the closed hi-hat, just like a real drum kit would. That's what that's for. You have the ability to change your output. So let's say that you've got your sound sounding pretty soundy and you want your soundy sound to sound soundier using your mixer. And so you want to adjust it though. Let's say you want to sidechain your kick so that your sound sounds soundier. So what you do to do that is you click on your kick and you say, I want my kick to be separate from these so I can independently process it, compress the living crap out of it, and sidechain the living crap out of everything else in my mix. Let's say that you're one of those really sidechainy people. So what you're going to do is you're going to change your output. But I'm an FL. I might not have this set up yet. So what I'm going to do is you come up here to this cog icon at the top. You'll be in the settings tab. You click on processing, click auto map outputs, and then you got to make sure you're on a track with some empty tracks next to it because you might accidentally be putting this in other tracks. But basically what I've said is, hey, use stereo outputs 11 and 12. It's going to scroll over stereo output offset 11 and 12 from whatever your currently selected mixer track is. I know there's a lot of words, but check it out. If I play it, look at that. Whoa, it appears in a new channel. That's like the end story. It's a lot of words, but that's the end of it. So that's what stereo output does. So cool. We've got these things down. We understand what those do. We understand what these do. We've got a pretty good handle on this. We're going places. We understand what the guys up here do. So let's go ahead and move down to the final things to do besides the effects. There's actually a whole lot more than what it looks like, but we'll breeze through the effects pretty quick. So we have the ability here to change our modulation sources. So it's pretty boring to have a sample start the same way every single time. That's not so fun. Maybe I want the panning to change in real time. Well, I can use an envelope or I can use an LFO. LFO, you have a trigger LFO. So every time you hit a note, it'll re-trigger the envelope. And then you also have the ability to sync your LFO up over time. So if you want your thing to beat in quarter notes, you'd want to use the sync function. I'm not going to go over these things in super detail. I'm going to assume you know what most of these do. Wave will scroll through your various waveforms, and frequency will change the frequency. You do not get visual representations of what these knobs do. You're able to bend your frequency using an exponential curve. I believe that's what the term they used. Anyways, it uses one curve to change another curve, and you can see this inside of S layer. So I'm going to bring up S layer, and here it is. And in S layer, they also have a bend function. And you see this looks like a sine wave, and with smoothing on, it pretty much is. And as I move it, ooh, it's using a curve to change another curve. So that's what that does. Maybe you have a really good use that you absolutely need that. Otherwise, your cat will die. Well, that is where that setting is at, so your cat can live. Now, you see up here, we have randomization in a sort of sample and hold function style. And we also have randomization as just straight up random. That's random. And that's cool. So that's what that does. We have the this A and R. This is one that I really touch or use, and one that I probably should use the info hints for. But I know it stands for attack release, and basically what it does is it lets you ramp in and ramp out your sound. What confuses me is this ramp up, ramp out. Like you can have a ramp in, but not a ramp out. I don't know. I don't touch this one all that often. But if I was going to, I would just experiment a little bit, get a feel for what the knob does. You have amplitude. This obviously is your amplitude, so how far up and down it goes. So let's go back to the sine wave. Well, I've got a pretty quick frequency here. Let's hook this thing up, right? Before we go on to the envelope. Let's say that I want to use an LFO to change my panning. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over to my panning. Down here, these are my modulation parameters. So if they've got these parameters, you can modulate it. If I click on LFO, I have now hooked up the LFO to the pan parameter inside of layer 1. This is, again, layer specific. So, okay, cool. But you see, nothing's moving. You might be going, why isn't anything moving? Well, you have to set a range. So I've just set full control. So I've given LFO 100% control. And you see that it moves, and you can see there's a nice little animation that goes with it. You might be going, oh my gosh, I'm getting cancer from this LFO panning thing. I'm sorry. And we have a couple other options here. We see we have so that's the amount. So now you know what amount does. And now you have select. And we also have this ability to spread values out. What does this mean? Well, each, you have 4 layers. It's kind of boring to give all layers the same value sometimes. So you can give them different values. So you can give them a spread out amount. So each value will start with a different offset of whatever this is. So you see, now it's not so much a pain. I mean, it still kind of sucks a little bit, but you see they have a scaled output, and it's repetitive. It's the same thing every time. So that's what's going on there. And so that's what spread does. That applies it for any parameters, just offset values. And cool. Now, whoops, I didn't mean to do that. Oh, if you double click something, it brings up the info panel. How nifty to know is that? So, okay. What about this guy over here? We should already know what this one does. This is the velocity one. So you can make things velocity sensitive by MIDI right click does not reset these values. Good to know. Oh, I did it. I don't know how I did that. But anyways, it's just a reset thing. You just drag it down. Velocity sensitivity is the same deal. So I can make it 100% velocity sensitive. So now as I hit it, I'm getting velocity sensitivity. If I hit it soft, my MIDI keyboard isn't the best. But if I hit it very soft, there we go. Oh, look at that. I have to barely tap though. Okay, so that's the velocity sensitivity. How hard or soft you hit the key will change the parameter. And then finally, we have the envelope. So if we come over here, we have an envelope setting. This envelope has a loop and a trigger function, which is the same thing. It will re-trigger when you hit a note. You have attack, decay, sustain, release, and an amp. It's an envelope. It's very straightforward. I don't really know what else to say about it. If you're confused about envelopes, you can go check out my Sound and Synth Basics course, and I will school you on envelopes. So, okay, cool. That's what's going on here. Let's jump over. That's pretty much what all this stuff does. So we're solid there. Let's jump over to the global effects. And we have a huge variety of things we can do here. And let's talk about the routing of these things first. So we see we have insert effects A and B, and you're able to turn them on and off per ensemble, which can be valuable. So you could have distortions on A, but not on scene 1, but not on scene 2, if that's something you wanted to do. These are going to be the same. They're global, so they're for every scene. So you can't have separate effects for each scene. Unfortunately, I don't know why. CPU maybe got in the way. I don't know what the deal is, but you can't do that. And I'm able to turn them on and off individually here, but this is like global on and off. So turn it off, it's off, man. It's not coming back on. It's not like these on off buttons up here. We also have sends, and so you're able to send your signal straight to these guys. These are your sends. You have a reverb and a delay, and you have, I mean, you could choose anything to be your send really, but typically reverb and delay are sends. So, okay, cool. That's how that works. Now there's a little bit more routing. You have this serial. You're able to route things in serial. So the signal, this is insert. So these two are your inserts. These two are your sends. And right now it's been inserted into my path. So my signal comes into my distortion. It goes into my reverb, and then I can send it to my reverb if I want. So that's actually a signal split. My signal will get split and go to my reverb and be processed through my inserts, and just like you would imagine sends and inserts to work. So, okay. Now let's get into what the effects do. So that's what this is. It's basically serial processing or not serial processing. And down here we have our mix and in. So we can gain stage our stuff if we want with our input. And we can also change the mix to be fully processed or only halfway processed or whatever you want it to be. So let's talk about what the different effects are. And I'm just going to give general overviews of them because they're pretty self-explanatory. You have auto pan, you have compression, delay, distortion, filter. FMRM is an interesting one. You can select one. I didn't do the research on where it gets the FMness from, if it's using like just some sort of straight up sine wave or if it FMs it against itself. But you'll see this module used in some of the presets to generate some interesting tone movements using the envelope modulation. So we're going to get into that. Now, we also have frequency shifting, grain delays. I'm just going to let you dig through here. It's pretty self-explanatory effect stuff. Nothing crazy, mind-blowing in here. Granular delay is very fun to play with. Let's stick with the AM/FM for now. So generally, you have this giant knob, and this giant knob's like the main parameter of the thing. And some things, like one thing that I was pleasantly surprised to find was your filter unit has a drive unit on it, some distortion on it, which I find quite nice. So, okay, cool. So we have all these fancy effects, and we're able to send and insert them. If you're not used to the convention of the way these things are set up, this is a terrible explanation for you. But if you are, this should be sufficient to tell you everything you absolutely need to know. One thing that's unique here, though, is we have the ability to do internal modulation. So down here we have MIDI mod, M-O-D, MIDI mode. I don't know why they don't just put an E on the end, but down here, we're able to do this. You see they're color coordinated to be specific with our scenes. And what this means is I can use this envelope here to generate movement. There's this little grayish shell around the knob, and there's this little white dot. And this little white dot will move when I play notes. You see, there it goes. Woo! And then it comes right back. And I really like how smooth this is. There are some, like Iris 2 is like a nightmare trying to see what's going on where if you're trying to follow the dot. Like you get a sense for it, but this is just way more straightforward. So, okay. And if I turn these off, basically now what I've done is scene 1 will now no longer have an envelope modulating the amount parameter. You see, it doesn't work. The scene 1 staying right where it was. But if I play these upper scenes, you see that it still moves. And I'm able to change the amount, attack decay, and I forgot what CVR does. Let's use the info hint to tell us. It controls, the exponential curve of the modulation envelope. So it's basically like the bend feature. And cool. Oh, no, that's not like the bend feature. It's like this. If we open up a 3 OSX, let's open up a massive. Because massive will have this. Or citrus. Harmer. Well, I always settled on Harmer. Exponential curves. It's like this. Only probably without this portion of the envelope. Exponential curves. There we go. So, yep. All right, cool. We have the mix. We have panning. Now, what's cool about the inserts, too, is you have the ability to use the sends here. So you can send signal to your send effects directly out of your inserts. So, okay, and that's the global effect. So at this point, you've pretty much got it. We've gone over Polyplex. Like that's what the features do. Let's talk about being musical with it now because cool, we know what all these buttons and knobs do. But let's talk about being musical. So if we come in here, one of my favorite places to just show off the beginning parts of it is they have these tonal and these effects ones. And they also have these kits. And so I think S layer has a lot more demonstrative power, but this is good too. So let's go into here. I want to show you something funny. They have a sound in here from the battery library. That oh na na na. I used that in a track, and so when I heard it, I was like, "What? That's not like a Twisted Tool sample. That's a sample from the battery library, which is totally where it comes from." I'm not gonna go and show you the sample, but you can go in there and look at the vocal samples or whatever. It's totally in there. But they have a voice setup of these.
Sophisticated.
Maybe all of these are battery samples. I didn't dig through it enough, but yeah, I recognize that one. So it's pretty handy dandy. Like these are some pretty amazing sounding things, just showing off some of the power that it can do. And again, this is treated more as kits. So you are expected to approach a cool sound. Now, meaning you're expected to make a sound, not one that would change like in real time unless you use the modulation capabilities. But an S layer, you can like randomize it. Like you'd be able to hit a key and it's basically like hitting this randomization feature up here, which is something that I'd really like to be able to do, but they don't give you the option of being able to do it. If we go into another, let's see here. They have some really cool, they have basic instruments sorts of things. So I could, for example, hit my key here, and let's say that I want to mess with something that sort of surprises me is we don't have a filter down here like the other one. There's no granular engine. Those two things kind of surprise me. But we can come in here, and they don't have the dots in here. Like you can't take advantage of that. So that's sort of a bummer. But we can alter this, right? And so we'll filter it out. Let's turn off the delay. And then we'll go to our set 2, and now we have an open filter movement. Y'all can also see that they have their own MIDI modulation going on, so that's something you could also mess with if you wanted. But this becomes a very powerful tool set for quickly switching and creating gradual changes as you move if you can't automate things over time. Like if you want to do it in real life, in real time, without all the knobs, you just hit a key and now your filter's moved up a little bit. So those are the key sounds. They have some, let's go over some of the kits like in here. Let's see here. So pretty cool. It's just really playable right out of the box. Now, if you want to use this to generate your own sounds, let's say that, okay, I like that kick. Let's go to the next one and let's just randomize the freaking crap out of this kick. Let's go to the main. Let's change the pitch a little bit and the panning by just a little itsy bit. And so now let's go ahead and randomize that. And we'll go to our third one and randomize that. Now we have these kicks. So we go. And then we'd have the option of doing this if we wanted. That one sounds kind of dumb. So maybe we do a little bit more extreme stuff. Find something we like a little bit more. Okay, let's say we like that a little bit. And I kind of like that. In this case, I'd probably pull it out and post and do some interesting things with it. I'm kind of scrolling through faster on what I would do if I were like producing right now. And then if we were to go up another one, that was our third generation. That one actually sounds kind of cool. Let's say that I want to really jack up this kit. Let's go over here and just mess with it. So you see, we can be very creative, and we haven't even fed it our own samples. We can come in here, feed our own samples, get very specific, do a lot of cool things. That's a rundown of Polyplex. If you have any questions, let me know. Subscribe, support me on Patreon, and have a blessed day.